Now, has anyone ever seen the Macy's Day Parade, the Thanksgiving Day Parade? Yes. Has anybody been there? We've got some people who have been there in person. That's amazing. That is one of the most impressive parades that we have in the United States. 50 million people watch this parade every Thanksgiving, at home and in person. I've only ever seen it on TV, and I've never lasted through the whole thing. It lasts about 3 hours, if I remember correctly. Now, if you tune in on TV or go there this Thanksgiving, you will see 28 floats. You'll see 16 of those huge balloons, and you'll see about 700 clowns. So if you don't like clowns, that might not be the parade for you to go to. Now, at the end of the parade comes this amazing float. Everybody's waiting for the VIP of the day, because all about ushering in the holiday shopping season. So get your Christmas list ready, because retailers are waiting a season of gratitude that this parade brings us into. A season of spending, prepare for Christmas. Now, if we were in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, we would have seen a very different parade. One with no floats, one with no balloons, one with no clowns, just one person on a donkey. Not quite as overwhelming as the Thanksgiving Day parade, probably over with in about 10 minutes. Jesus is riding into Jerusalem on a donkey. A crowd of people are gathered on the streets, waving their palm branches and shouting, Hosanna. Very different feel than what we call a parade today. Now, today we are in John's Gospel. We've been in John's Gospel for a couple of weeks, and this story about Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem is in all 4 of our Gospels, but they're all a little bit different. So in Mark's Gospel, we have people lined up on the street waving branches. In Matthew's Gospel, they're leafy branches. In Luke's Gospel, there are no branches. And in John's Gospel, we find out they are palm branches. Now, why is Jesus coming into Jerusalem? What's the occasion? It's Passover. This is the first day of Passover. Everybody is coming into Jerusalem for this celebration. Passover is one of the 3 main Jewish feasts where all of the males are required to come to the temple. They all have to arrive. They make pilgrimage into Jerusalem. Now, I want you to think about how many people that might be. I couldn't find a good, reliable estimate of how many people lived in Jerusalem at the time of Jesus, but probably between 35,000 and 55,000. Very large city, small space, everybody crowded in together. Now, Jackson has about 31,000. Now, imagine if that population doubled, which is what happens at Passover in Jerusalem. As all of the family come to Jerusalem for this feast, the population doubles. And so imagine that every hotel room is filled, every Airbnb is rented, the streets are clogged with traffic, people have their campers out at the lake, and you think if you can just get to Meijer to get your groceries, it would be okay, but the lines are all the way back to the produce. And you finally get home, and you have 15 relatives in your house, and they're all helping themselves to your refrigerator. And it is a time of great joy, because all the family is together. Now, what are they celebrating at Passover? The Jewish people are celebrating their identity and their liberation. As they celebrate this feast called the Seder, they all gather together, they tell the stories of their liberation. They share 4 cups of symbolic wine, and they say, we were slaves in Egypt, we cried out to God, God heard our cry, and God set us free. That is the formation of their identity. That is who they are as a nation. And they celebrate that identity and their liberation. It's a story of liberation when they were set free from slavery in Egypt. Now imagine all of these people coming into Jerusalem to celebrate their identity and to celebrate their liberation. It is a time of great joy. And Jesus is coming into Jerusalem again for that celebration. Now you might remember another time in Scripture when Jesus was there for Passover, when he was 12. Do you remember the story? Jesus' whole family travels into Jerusalem so that they can all be there for Passover. They complete their week and they head for home, and they've traveled for 3 days before they realize Jesus is not with them. And his parents have to turn around and go all the way back, and they find him in the temple teaching the priests. And now Jesus is back again. Now, what you may not know is there was another parade happening at exactly the same time. According to a book called The Last Week by Marcus Borg and John Dominic Crossan, there was another parade on the other side of Jerusalem. As Jesus came into the east gate, what might be called the back door of Jerusalem, on his donkey, there was another parade on the other side of the city coming into the west gate. And this parade would rival that Thanksgiving Day parade that we saw a picture of a moment ago. This parade would have hundreds of troops with their armor on and their weapons drawn, and horses and chariots and trumpeters and flags, this huge procession coming into Jerusalem at the same time on the other side of the city. And anybody who was anybody was there. Who were they waiting for? It wasn't Santa Claus. It was Pontius Pilate. Pilate was coming into Jerusalem. You see, he didn't live there. He lived 60 miles away on the Mediterranean in a beautiful palace in the town of Caesarea. But he was the governor of the whole area of Judea. And he arrived on the first day of Passover, just like Jesus did, for a reason. He did not come peacefully as Jesus did. Pilate came in a parade of power. He came to make sure that when all of these Jewish people got together and remembered who they are and their story of liberation, that none of them would get any ideas about having a revolution. So he comes in to make sure that everybody knows you might all be God's people, but Rome is in charge. So Pilate is bringing a parade of power into the city on one side, while Jesus is walking in on a donkey's back in a parade of peace on the other side of the city. Now, who would be at Jesus's parade? Actor and minister Terry Gow imagines who might be at the Jesus parade of peace. She said the 10 lepers would be there, wouldn't they? They're healed now. The lame and the blind would be there, but they would no longer be lame or blind. The paralytic who was lowered through the roof, he would be there. Mary and Martha would be there. Jairus and his daughter, the widow and her son, the man with the unclean spirit, they would all be there. The tax collectors would be there. The woman with the alabaster jar would be there. Mary and Martha and Lazarus, who was raised from the dead by Jesus, they would all be there. And the disciples, Mary Magdalene. Imagine all the people whose lives Jesus touched and all of those who heard about it. They are all gathered at the other side of the city, the east gate, to welcome Jesus. And they're excited that Jesus is coming, because they have all heard the story of Lazarus. If we went back in our Bibles just a little bit, chapter 11 and 12 in John's Gospel, we would read a bit about Lazarus. Lazarus was dead. He was in the tomb. And Jesus called him forth, and he was raised from the dead. And now people are seeing him shopping at Walmart. And they ran into him at the post office, and they are talking about it. And as word spreads, more and more people get excited, John's gospel tells us, and they are excited to see Jesus come into Jerusalem. They are there because of Lazarus. But the chief priests and the Pharisees are not so happy about Lazarus. In fact, they're planning to kill him. Poor guy. He's going to die twice. They have to get rid of the evidence. And the Pharisees in John's gospel throw up their hands and say, what are we going to do? The whole world is going after him. Everybody that heard about Lazarus would be at that Palm Parade, the Parade of Peace. But everybody who was anybody in Jerusalem would be at the other parade, the Parade of Power. The chief priests would all be there. Why would they be at the Parade of Power? Now, let's not be too hard on them. Let's not judge the chief priests or the Pharisees. Let's understand why they would be at the parade where Pontius Pilate is coming into town. You see, when Rome overtook a nation or a city, when they occupied it, one of the first things that they would do would be to destroy the temple, to knock down the altars, to demolish the shrines, to kill the religion, the traditions, the spirituality of the people, because that would make the people vulnerable. That would destroy their identity. And then Rome could move in and people would be afraid and they would obey. But in Jerusalem, they didn't do that. The temple is still standing. The chief priests are still doing their sacrifices. They are still having their festivals. All the Jewish people are still coming for Passover. Why is that happening? Now, there are some suggestions that Rome had some respect for Judaism because they thought it was an ancient religion. And I think, too, that they knew the Jewish people were so stubborn that they would die before they would let that temple be destroyed, which, by the way, happens 50 years after our reading today. For whatever reason, Pilate makes an alliance with the priests. Pilate says, you can keep your religion, you can worship your God, you can make your sacrifices. I'll allow you to do all of that as long as you pay a temple tax, a tribute to Rome. It's got to be a moneymaker for Pilate or he's not going to let it happen. So the priests decide to do that, and they know that they're doing what's best for their people. They want to preserve their national identity. They want to preserve their faith, their religion, their worship. They believe they're doing the best thing they can do in the circumstances, and so they make this agreement with the Roman government. And they set up money changers in the temple. And everybody has to put money in so that the temple tax can be paid. And some people are skimming a little extra money off the top, but these folks, they have families. They need to take care of their own. And so they're going to go to this parade of power. They're going to show Pilate that they are in support because they need to do it. Otherwise, their religion, their faith, their way of being, their identity in the world is compromised. I can understand that. Can you? I can understand why they would do that. Now, if you were a merchant and you did business with the Romans, you would also be at the parade of power because you know you need to be. If your whole family is excited about Pilate coming and seeing the big parade, you would probably go with them too. Now, we can't judge folks who choose to go to the parade of power. We can hope that they're doing the best that they can. What I'm wondering, though, is if we were in Jerusalem, which parade would we go to? We're all here in church. This is a Christian church, and so we all know the right answer is Jesus, so we would go to the parade of peace. But those folks that went to that parade, the ones that shouted Hosanna and called Jesus King, they are in danger of losing their lives for that. That's the exact kind of uprising that Pilate cannot afford to let happen. Fortunately, though, all the soldiers are at the other side of town. It was risky to follow Jesus. It cost something. Now today, we have exactly the same choice before us: the parade of power or the parade of peace. We see power springing up all over the world. We see it in Russia, right? We see it in Israel, where people in power are trying to get more power. And we are seeing it right here. And I'm going to confess to you today, this was not part of my message, that I am guilty of judging the folks who have gone to the power parade. I have looked at the folks who seem to be wanting to grab power right here in our nation, and I have judged them. I have felt like they are all wandering, floating a little too far away from reality, that there is a lot of hot air, probably enough to fill 16 balloons, and there seems to be about 700 clowns. But what did Jesus tell us to do when we feel threatened? When we see something happening we don't agree with? When someone seems to be pushing an agenda that makes us feel afraid, what do we do for those folks that we call enemy? Come on, we've done this before. What do we do for those we call enemy? We pray for them and we bless them. We do not judge them. Boy, that's hard to do. When they're doing something that we so adamantly believe is wrong, we do not judge. Instead, we try to understand that the folks that are following this parade of power believe deep in their hearts that they are doing what is right to protect their faith and their worship and their religion and the identity of the people. They believe that with all their heart. So I can understand why there would be a parade of power. And I can understand why people who are feeling a little bit persecuted or a little bit, I don't want to say marginalized, let me think of a word here. People who are being asked to give up some of their privilege would be attracted to that kind of power. Just like the folks watching Pilate come into the city, they just want to be close to it because they really believe Pilate is going to take care of things. As long as they can stay on his good side, life for them will be better. And so I see people in this parade of power cheering and waving, very excited about someone who wields a lot of power. And they're saying things like, well, you know, Pilate, he's kind of brutal. He gets rid of people that don't do what he wants, but God can use him. God can use him, and we will all be the better for it. I can understand all that. But what I cannot understand is, where is the parade of peace? Where's our peace parade? I see opposition to the parade of power, but that's just more power wearing a different name. So where's the parade of peace? And this troubled me so much until I read our reading for today again, and I saw that picture of Jesus on the donkey, and I realized the parade of peace only has one. Is it me? Are we the one person who is going to be our own peace parade, bringing peace into this world, following Jesus, embodying the peace of Christ, and sharing it with one another in the face of the parade of power, knowing that it's happening and knowing we probably cannot do anything to stop it? Are we going to be the one person, our own parade of peace? And how will we do that? What can we possibly accomplish? Well, let me ask you this. How many of you knew that Pilate had this huge parade of power coming into Jerusalem at exactly the same time as Jesus. How many of you knew? Hold up your hands. One person. How many of you knew that Jesus rode a donkey into Jerusalem on this first day of Passover? One person can make a difference. Look at how many of us knew the story of Jesus, and only one person knew the story about Pilate. Sometime in the future, the parade of power may be forgotten, but the choices you make today to embody peace, those will not be forgotten. That will live on. Margaret Mead said that if just a small community of thoughtful, dedicated individuals can make a decision, they can change the world. And indeed, they are the only things that ever have changed the world. Small pockets of people. And that's what this story is inviting us to be today, to embody peace. Now, to learn how to do that, I turn to Queen Elizabeth, who perfected the parade wave. I want everybody to try it. Can you do it? Very nice. Closed fingers, open palm. Now notice the parade of power, fist, closed palm. The parade of peace, open palm. So today, what I'd like you to do is to think about this. Which parade would you go to? Are you in favor of power, or are you in favor of peace? And if you choose peace, I want you to wave at everybody you see. Can you imagine driving home today, you're at a stoplight, there's a car beside you, and you just wave and smile at those people? They are going to think you are out of your mind. But isn't that what we need? Isn't it what we need in this world? Don't we need more people to just say, you're my family. You're my brother or sister. You are just like me. You're doing the best you think you can do. And I'm just going to give you peace instead of judgment. Can we do that today? Practice your peace wave today to everybody that you see. And decide, is it your fist or is it your open palm that you want to wave today? Amen.